Welcome to Nightlife, the podcast.
Well, what we're going to do now here on Nightlife is gaze into the crystal ball to consider the ways that Australia's population will and won't change in 2026. Our resident demographer, Simon Kuestenmacher, is here. He's armed with predictions on everything from birth rate to house prices. He's the co-founder and director of the Demographics Group. Simon, welcome back.
Always good to be on.
Excellent. Now, you earn your living looking at demographic data to make forecasts about the future. Would you say you're pretty good at it now? How did your predictions from last year go?
Well, I think on overall they went really well. My first prediction that I made went wrong. I did claim that we would have Peter Dutton as Prime Minister solely based on the argument that he was 54 at the time, and that is the exact time or age of the life cycle that you tend to take in prime ministers. So that was wrong. It was, of course, the comical tongue-in-cheek reference there. But overall, demographic forecasts are rather predictable because we look at trends that don't tend to shift all that much, and therefore quite a few of those forecasts won't sound all that bold, but some of the conclusions, of course, might sound a bit bolder.
All right, so I'm going to start by looking at birth rates. You did predict they would continue to decline last year, which they did. Will that continue this year?
Most certainly. So I'm very, very confident that birth rates continue to fall to new lows. I am countering here the narrative that the Center for Population spins. They think that the birth rates will continue a bit, but I see so many factors just driving down the confidence of young couples in particular. So that means we will not see a recovery. I'm very confident about that.
So what are those factors?
Well, the idea is that you tend to make more babies if you're more optimistic about your future. That means your future income, and that means your future serviceability of a household, your future ability to pay for childcare. And I don't see any respite there in the next year or so, where I would argue that en masse Australians will become more optimistic and more confident about their economic future. So I think birth rates will remain repressed.
So another big one for many Australians is interest rates, and the RBA increased them on Tuesday. Is that a sign of things to come?
I would argue that is a sign of things to come for the next decade or so, because demographically speaking, I would suggest that the whole next decade wants to see higher interest rates on average than we would have seen last decade, simply because we push the biggest generation ever, the millennials, people born in the 80s and 90s, into the highest spending phase of the life cycle, the mid-40s. So this is when you earn the most money and when you spend the most money. Every penny that you earn in your mid-40s goes straight back into the economy, and that spending is inflationary in nature. And then you must counter this as the RBA, because you also probably have a government, and certainly in the next year, that heavily spends. That is inflationary in nature. Then you have the population spending like there's no tomorrow. That means you must counter it with the one tool that you've been granted, which is the cash rate, which of course translates into the interest rates. So that of course means higher interest rates. And yes, it is true that the big baby boomer cohort does leave the workforce in the coming, the next years. And traditionally speaking, this would have been a deflationary impact, because back in the day, usually when you stopped drawing a wage was the day you turned into a poor penny-pinching pensioner and you became this deflationary asset. That's not the case with boomers. They are the richest generation, and most of them are already in retirement. We know that in the early years of retirement, baby boomers increased their spending significantly. So we are facing a year where the biggest generation and the richest generation spends lavishly. So therefore, I would suggest this consumption drives interest rates up. Top this with a government that likes to spend. So please don't be all that surprised if you see another rate hike or so.
Simon Kuestenmacher is with us. He's co-founder and director of the Demographics Group. And if the millennials are too worried about their future to have kids, Simon, surely they can't afford houses. Are they actually going to be hit by the interest rates?
Yes, they will. In a sense, the high interest rates have less of an impact for renters. So if you can't afford at all, the rents shouldn't increase that much just due to interest rates. The rents will only increase because we don't add enough housing supply, and we still remain a migration nation. We still remain a country that adds 100,000 people a year just through more births than deaths. On top of this, call it 240,000 net new migrants each year. But the housing market, the housing system will remain under pressure. So do not expect housing to become more affordable. We might see something like it will get harder with high interest rates to push really high mortgage payments through because you can't service these mortgages. That might in some sort of way slow down the house price growth, but it won't make housing more affordable.
So another number we're closely following is unemployment. What do you think is going to happen for unemployment in the coming year?
That will remain hyper low. If you listen to the RBA, that still seems to be a bit of a surprise to them. I don't see it like this at all. I'm very, very confident that unemployment remains hyper low in Australia simply because we do retire this big baby boomer cohort. All the while at the other end of the spectrum, we take in a relatively small cohort of Gen Zs into the workforce. So big cohort out, smallish cohort in. We continue to send, the millennials continue to make babies for another 10 years. That means they go on parental leave the world of work at least temporarily. These millennials that are on parental leave these jobs must be filled by someone. So that all drives the unemployment rate down. So I don't see a plausible scenario with high unemployment. So unemployment will definitely stay well below the 5.
Now, does that mean that the number of migrants coming into Australia will also remain high because we're going to need migrants to fill the jobs that are available?
Absolutely. So from an economic perspective and from a fiscal perspective, you will want to continue to take in migrants. There's always the wild card that a political party decides that they want fewer migrants to appease their voter base. But we are running out of workers rapidly. We retire so many people. We have existing skills shortage across all industries. AI automation does not seem to fill these holes sufficiently enough. So we will rely on migration. We, for example, know that we age as a country. We double the 85 plus cohort in the next 14 years. That, of course, means we must double the aged care system because half of the 85 plus cohort needs care on a daily basis. Essentially, every aged care worker under the age of 40 is imported labor from overseas. If you want to cut migration, be my guest, do it. But you then need to suffer the consequences on the labor market, which in turn massively takes a hit on your budget because migrants pay tax at much higher rates, at much higher shares than the Australian-born population. About half of the Australian-born population works because some are kids, some are old, and 66% or so of the foreign-born population works because they are younger on average, and we import them to work. So that means if a federal budget relies to about 55% or so on income tax, which treasurer would be willingly cut their income? Unless you tell me how you massively reform the whole tax system, don't bet on a party to cut migration. So migration will stay at the long-term average of 240,000 migrants a year, give or take 10% or so. That'll definitely be the case. I don't see any plausible scenario that sees migration cut.
And yet, Simon, with the increase in voting intentions supportive of One Nation that we've been hearing about recently, in One Nation, obviously a party that has been anti-high levels of immigration since the time of its inception. I mean, is it going to continue to be a big political issue in Australia? And how should politicians step through that if you're saying, well, we actually can't really decrease migration because migrants are so essential for our workforce?
Yeah, so it will most certainly be a hot topic. Migrants remain the single best cohort to blame for any misfortune or perceived misfortune, because this is a non-voting cohort. So that is very, very easy. Of course, some narratives around housing affordability, for example, spin themselves very nicely. You can say, well, let's take in 100,000 fewer migrants. That translates into 40,000 fewer homes that we need in Australia. And you can then say, dear voters, I'm doing this for you so that housing is more affordable. At the same time, we then this party then ticked the box of having talked about housing affordability, which is a win. But you then do not need to talk about all the ways that you actively drive up house prices in Australia. You want to remember that housing is unaffordable by design. The system has no interest in making housing more affordable. 3/4 of voters live in a house that they own. You have 2.5 million mom and dad landlords, all voters that provide the entire rental stock that the renters live in. You have banks that do nothing than provide mortgages. You have states that for 50 to 60% of their income rely on property-related taxes. The list is long of people that want housing to go up. John Howard famously quipped, of course, that he never met a voter that complained about their house going up in price. So you do have unfortunate people like poor people and young people, but they are a minority. So screw them. Why would I make housing cheaper for them? It's not a short-term political gain. And so the system just keeps making housing more expensive.
Simon Kuestenmacher is with us. Simon, we were talking about the baby boomers going into retirement who are going to start spending all that money. I've got an SMS from Greg who says, I'm a single guy, just turned 65. I worked my guts out. I've got about 4 million in super. I'm now on a spending spree until I die. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so should he. So to be honest, from an individual's perspective, he won't be able to take the money into the grave. You might as well spend it. You might as well enjoy life, and he should enjoy it rather sooner than later, because God knows how long he will live. And of course, you want to make sure to get the most out of this. This is all well in the rights of any individual, but of course, we know that he is driving up inflation just a tiny bit.
So what do you do, Simon? I mean, I know you're a demographer, not an economist, but what do you do to capture that kind of inflationary spending? I mean, if Greg's not going to be caught by whatever the RBA does, how do you dampen his enthusiasm?
It's a very difficult issue that needs a very deliberate and outspoken approach. Because maybe some young listeners might say, okay, what I really want is I want them to take the hammer to the housing market and really make sure that house prices drop by 30%. Or something like this. This might be a wonderful fantasy, but this would not only create financial havoc in Australia, it would also leave our banks at the risk of collapsing. And then you lead this whole country into a recession. So we also can't just make sure that we just give everyone heaps of money by massively increasing wages, because this is, of course, inflationary as well. So what you would want to do is you want to create a set of policies where wages grow a tiny bit faster than house prices. The relation between wages and house prices is what makes up affordability. And you would then make housing a bit more affordable over decades. So because house prices would, in relative terms, be drawn down in relation to wages, people wouldn't sell off property at rapidly, and you could then kind of like rejig a system. But this would be a deliberate, bipartisan approach that will not be done in a couple of years. It will take decades.
In the meantime, Greg, you enjoy yourself. Simon, thank you so much, and welcome back to Nightlife for the year.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And Greg, enjoy your spending.
There's Simon Kuestenmacher. He is co-founder and director of the Demographics Group. You are on Nightlife on ABC.
You've been listening to a Nightlife podcast. For more great conversations about the issues that impact you, as well as features on travel and food, head to the Nightlife webpage. You'll find it at abc.net.au/nightlife. You don't need to be a night owl to enjoy the nightlife.